Behind a face that does not move, a man can think a great deal. People look at us and see stone. They see the red wool, the brass, the tall black bearskin pulled low to the brow, the white gloves folded over the rifle, and they decide there is nothing inside. I have stood at the East Arch of Caldmore for 11 years, and in all that time I have never once told a soul what I was thinking. I will tell you now, because the day I am going to describe was the day my silence finally spoke for itself. It was high summer and the forecourt shimmered. The wool of the tunic drank the heat and held it against the skin. Sweat tracked down the inside of my collar and I let it. A guardsman learns that the body will complain about anything if you listen to it, so you stop listening. You give the body nothing. You give the crowd nothing. You stand and you let the world do its noise around you. There was a great deal of noise that morning. The House of Bellicourt was conferring the Order of the Silver Heart, and the man come to receive it was Roland Maddox, who owned more ships than the Navy and was fond of saying so. He had paid for a hospital wing and 3 lifeboats, and he had let it be known, in the way such men do, that the king owed him an afternoon of gratitude. The order is an old thing. It is given to men who serve the realm. Whether buying lifeboats is the same as serving I leave to wiser men, but I will say that the king is careful with that honor, and that care is the whole of this story. I knew none of this as fact when I took my post. I knew only that a long black motor car had come through the gates, and that a man in a gray suit had stepped out of it and looked up at the palace the way a buyer looks at a horse. You should know one more thing about me before I go on, because without it the rest is only a man being struck and standing there, and that is not what happened. 11 years before, I was a young lieutenant in the 8th Mountain Rifles. There was a bad night at Drennan Pass, an order misread. A column sent the wrong way, men lost in the snow. The fault was not mine. The fault belonged to someone above me who had more friends than I did, and when the inquiry came, I was the convenient name. I said nothing. I had been raised to believe the truth does not need a man to shout for it. It only needs him to stand still long enough for it to arrive. So I stood still. I took the disgrace, and I was sent here to the gate, where a broken officer could do no further harm. What the inquiry did not put in its papers, because it would have complicated the convenient name, was that I had gone back into that snow alone and carried 2 of those men out on my own back. There is a small bronze cross in a drawer in my quarters for it. The Drennan Cross. I have never worn it. A man does not wear a medal for a night he would give anything to undo. So when Roland Maddox crossed my forecourt as if he owned the stone, I was perhaps the one man in the realm least likely to be impressed by a powerful person, and perhaps the one most practiced at being still while the world decided he was nothing. He noticed me on his second pass. The first time he had been busy being photographed. The second time he was bored, and a bored, powerful man is a dangerous thing. He stopped a few feet from my post and tilted his head. "They reel," he said to the aide beside him, loud enough for me. "Or do they wind them up in the morning?" I looked through him at the middle distance, as I am trained to do. The middle distance is a guardsman's whole horizon. You learn to put a man's face into it and let him slide past like weather. That should have ended it. With most men it does. But Maddox had found a thing that would not react, and he had spent his whole life testing things to see if they would give him what he wanted. He stepped closer. He waved a hand in front of my eyes. He clicked his fingers by my ear. The aide laughed because the aide was paid to laugh. "Hey," Maddox said. "Soldier, you know who I am. You should salute a man like me. Go on, salute." I did not salute. We salute the colors, the sovereign, and our officers. We do not salute money. Behind my still face I felt the old familiar thing settle into me, cold and steady, the thing I learned in the snow. You cannot be moved by a man who only knows how to push. He did not like that. Men like Maddox never mind being refused half so much as they mind being ignored. A small crowd had gathered now, the way crowds do around a famous face, phones already lifted. He had an audience, and an audience changes such a man. It pours something into the empty place in him. I said salute. His voice had dropped the joke out of it. He came right up to me, close enough that I could smell the cigar on his coat, and he reached out and flicked the brim of my bearskin with 2 fingers hard, so it rocked back on my head. A bearskin does not weigh much, but it sits high, and a sharp knock will tip it. Mine slid back an inch, and the chin strap bit into my throat. I did not raise a hand. I straightened my neck slow and let the cap settle, and I put my eyes back into the middle distance. That was the moment, I think, when it stopped being a powerful man amusing himself and became something he could not walk back from. The crowd had gone quiet. He could feel it, the way the laughter had curdled into something watching. And instead of stepping away, which any sensible man would have done, he doubled it. He needed to win in front of them now. He put his open hand flat against my shoulder and he shoved me. I am a large man, and I have braced against worse than a financier in soft shoes, so I did not fall. I rocked back on my heel and I came forward again onto my mark, exactly where I had been, my rifle never leaving the vertical. But the shove had landed, and the phones had caught it, and a sound went through the crowd that I have only ever heard once or twice in my life. The sound of a great many people deciding at the same instant that they have just watched something wrong. "Look at him," Maddox said, and now there was a thin shake in his voice because part of him had begun to understand. "Won't even defend himself. That's what you people are. Decoration, painted men." Here is what I was thinking behind the face. I was thinking of the snow. I was thinking that I had been called worse than painted and by better men than him, and that the discipline which had cost me everything at Drennan was the same discipline holding me on my mark now, and that there is a difference, which the Maddoxes of the world never learn, between a man who does not strike because he cannot, and a man who does not strike because he has decided not to. The first is weakness. The second is the only real strength there is. I had 2 of those men's lives in my arms once, in the dark, and not 1 ounce of that came from a hand raised in anger. So I gave him nothing. I gave him the middle distance and the steady breath and the rifle held true, and I let him stand there in front of the crowd he had wanted, getting smaller by the second. What I did not know, what Maddox certainly did not know, was that the east arch sits directly beneath the long windows of the king's study, and that the king of Bellicourt is an early riser who does not care to be photographed, and so watches his own forecourt from above, unseen, more often than his court would like. He had been at that window the whole time. The relief came then, brisk, my own Sergeant Doyle marching the changing detail across the stones with a face like a closed door, and behind them, not part of the ceremony at all, came Colonel Vane of the household walking fast, the way a man walks when he has been sent. The crowd parted for him. He went not to me but to Maddox, and he said something quiet that I could not hear, and I watched the color leave the magnate's face. The Order of the Silver Heart was to be conferred at noon in the Hall of Banners with the king's own hand. It was not conferred. At 1/4 to the hour the chamberlain came out onto the steps and read a short line to the assembled press, and the line was this, that His Majesty had reflected and found that the honor would not be given today, for the realm does not decorate a man who would strike another who has sworn never to strike back. He did not say my name. He did not need to. The phones had already said everything. Maddox left through the same gates he had come in by in the same long black car, and the crowd that had gathered to admire him watched him go in a silence far heavier than any insult. He had come to Caldmore to be made larger, and a still man at a gate had made him small, and he had done all of the work himself. I never raised my voice. I never raised my hand. I only refused to be moved, and a man's own arrogance, given enough rope and a wide enough audience, will always finish the job. There is a last thing, and it is the thing I think about most. That evening Colonel Vane came to my quarters, which is not a thing colonels do. He stood in my small room and he looked at the drawer because somehow he knew, the way the household always seems to know, and he asked me if it was true about Drennan Pass. I said it was a long time ago. He said the king had asked. And then he asked me to wear the cross. I have thought about it many times since. I did not put it on for the photographs, and there were photographs. I did not put it on to make Maddox smaller. He was already as small as a man can be. I put it on, finally, after 11 years in the drawer, for the two men I carried out of the snow, because a king I had never spoken to had looked down from a window and understood, without being told, what the rest of the world had gotten wrong about me for over a decade, that the man who will not move is not the man who cannot, but the man who has already decided what he is willing to lose. I stand at the East Arch still. People look at me and see stone. Let them. I know now what I always suspected and never dared to say out loud, even behind the still face, that the discipline is not the absence of the man. The discipline is the man. And on the right day, in front of the right window, it speaks louder than any salute a magnate could ever buy.